Have you ever felt like you're slowly fading away, even at the exact moment you seem most visibly present to everyone else? We are living in a strange era, where silence is often mistaken for failure, and being unseen is treated like a sign that you're falling behind. Every day, we get pulled into an invisible race to maintain our presence. We share every thought, update every action, and crave instant reactions from the outside world. Society glorifies constant connection, yet ironically, that very pressure is stripping people of mental clarity and dimming the true essence of who they really are. We are afraid that if we pause, even for a single moment, the world will rush past and leave us behind. But in the middle of all the noise of applause and that endless stream of information, a harsh truth begins to surface. The greatest danger in a person's life isn't being forgotten or disappearing from other people's sight. The real danger is living your entire life without ever truly being understood, without ever reaching the most authentic version of yourself. So how do you escape this trap of noise? Sometimes, the only way to find real peace isn't to shout louder, it's to learn how to step back. Let's explore the power of stillness and the art of finding yourself again, even as the world outside keeps spinning without pause. That's exactly when we need to seriously reconsider the true cost of constant presence. In a world that never sleeps, always being available, responding quickly, and maintaining a flawless image has become an unspoken standard. But we rarely realize that, in exchange for society's approval, we are quietly paying with our own mental exhaustion and a sense of alienation inside our very own bodies. We live to please others, relentlessly sanding down the sharp edges of our personality to create a more agreeable version, a persona that fits the expectations of the crowd. But the tragedy is this: the more perfect the mask becomes, the more unfamiliar and faded our true self inside begins to feel. Today, we are not going to talk about how to stand out more. Instead, we are going to explore a philosophy that moves in the complete opposite direction of that frantic current, the art of disappearing and the power of intentional silence. This is not a call to run away from responsibility or abandon society. It is a journey back to inner wholeness. Constant visibility on digital platforms or in social relationships does not mean we are building truly meaningful connections. On the contrary, it's often nothing more than an exhausting performance, where we burn precious energy just to maintain the illusion of being busy and important. In this piece, we will peel back those glossy layers to reach the core of the issue. We will explore why solitude is a non-negotiable condition for restoring energy, completely different from the loneliness so many people confuse it with. From deep psychological perspectives to lessons drawn from great thinkers, we will see that daring to step out of the spotlight, daring to disconnect from the noise outside, is the only way to reconnect profoundly with the world within. This journey will lead you through stages of awareness, from recognizing internal conflict, to courageously practicing silent resistance, to rebuilding yourself through powerful tools like journaling. The ultimate goal is not to turn you into a hermit cut off from the world, but to help you build an unshakable inner foundation, so that when you choose to return, you will show up with an entirely new posture, self-governed, authentic, and at peace. Let's begin the journey of finding yourself again, starting with these necessary steps back. To deeply understand the power of withdrawing from the crowd, let's swim against the current of time and return to Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest psychiatrists and thinkers of the 20th century. Born in Switzerland, Jung was not only the man who laid the foundation for analytical psychology, but also someone who devoted his entire life to exploring the deepest layers of the human psyche. After separating from his mentor Sigmund Freud and going through a period of profound inner crisis, Jung realized that to heal and truly understand himself, he could not rely solely on reason or textbook theories. He needed a physical and spiritual space completely set apart. In 1922, Jung began building a structure that would later become a symbol of his philosophy of life. The Bollingen Tower. Standing alone on the shores of Lake Zurich, this was not a comfortable vacation home. Jung deliberately designed it without electricity, without modern heating or running water. There, he carved stone with his own hands, split firewood, lit oil lamps, and boiled water drawn from a well. For Jung, returning to the most primitive forms of daily living was not ascetic suffering, but the only way to anchor his mind in reality and completely separate himself from the distractions of academic life and the society of his time. The Bollingen Tower became the physical embodiment of the concept of solitude that Jung pursued. He believed modern people were losing their souls because they lacked the silence needed to dialogue with the unconscious. In that still space, Jung wrote the most important works of his life and developed the concept of individuation, the process of becoming the unique and whole version of oneself. He once shared the necessity of such a place in his memoir, "I have to be alone with myself to know myself. Such silence is distinct. In the silence, one can hear the voice of the gods." The story of Carl Jung and the Bollingen Tower is not merely a historical anecdote, it is a powerful reminder for us today. If a great mind like Jung needed to disappear from the civilized world, needed to build a fortress of silence to protect his clarity, then we, living in the middle of a digital information storm, need our own Bollingen Towers more than ever. His perspective gives us a foundation to understand that stepping out of the social current is not an eccentric act, but a strategic move to preserve the true self under the pressure of collective conformity. And from this context, we will begin exploring the core principles for building an unshakable inner life. The first, and most important, principle we need to explore on this journey is learning to identify and dismantle the perception trap, the trap of perception. This is a profound psychological concept that explains the roots of the mental exhaustion modern people are forced to carry, and it is the primary reason why intentional disappearance has become so necessary. To truly understand the perception trap, we have to look directly at how the ego operates in society. In Carl Jung's psychology, each of us carries a persona whenever we step into the outside world. Persona, in its original Latin meaning, refers to the mask worn by ancient Roman actors to embody a character. In real life, the persona is the social face we present in order to interact with others. It includes the way we speak, the clothes we wear, the opinions we share publicly, and the attitude we choose to meet the world with. By nature, the persona isn't bad. It is a necessary protective layer that helps us communicate smoothly and maintain social relationships in a harmonious way. However, the problem begins, and the trap starts to close, when we start to completely identify ourselves with that mask. The perception trap happens when the boundary between the performer and the role disappears. We begin to believe we are the image we have, painstakingly built to please others. When society praises your business, you start to believe your worth lies in productivity. When people applaud your cheerful, outgoing nature, you begin to bury every sadness and wound deep inside, afraid that if it shows, you won't be loved anymore. Gradually, we live in a state of constant reaction. We observe what others want, and unconsciously adjust our behavior to match that mold. The danger of this trap is that it strips away the sovereignty of the inner life. We fall into a vicious loop of external validation. Imagine your mind as a room filled with mirrors. In that room, you don't see yourself directly. You only see your reflection through the eyes of parents, friends, co-workers, and society. If those mirrors are warped, or if they only reflect what they want to see in you, then your perception of yourself becomes distorted as well. We become prisoners of our own image, afraid to change, because change means breaking other people's expectations. What's more, the perception trap is reinforced by a subtle psychological mechanism known as the pressure of consistency. People tend to view others through fixed labels and outdated images. Once you've been positioned as the strong one, society won't allow you to be weak. Once you're known as the one who always helps, saying no will be treated like betrayal. The people around us, whether unintentionally or deliberately, often try to lock us inside past versions of ourselves because it makes them feel safe and easier to control. And we unconsciously comply in order to preserve a false sense of safety in our relationships. The result is a silent but violent conflict, the conflict between the person who is growing and changing inside, and the frozen, outdated person the outside world is still seeing. The exhaustion you feel doesn't simply come from workload or life pressure. It comes from the massive effort required to maintain this contradiction. Like wearing a shirt that's too tight day after day, the friction between your true self and your social shell creates invisible but painful psychological wounds. You feel disconnected from yourself. You do things you don't truly want to do. You smile smiles that aren't truly joyful, and you speak words that don't come from the heart. Your constant presence, at that point, is actually the greatest absence of all, the absence of the soul. Carl Jung emphasized that the most important journey of a human life is individuation, the process of becoming an independent and whole individual. He argued that we cannot reach this state if we remain endlessly busy reflecting other people's light. This distorted perception blocks us from accessing our hidden parts, our unrealized potential, and even the shadow that must be accepted within us. Only when we recognize that we are trapped does true awakening begin. Recognizing the perception trap is not about becoming bitter toward the world or rejecting every social responsibility. Its purpose is to help us understand, why do I need to withdraw? Why do I need to disappear for a while? Because if you never separate yourself from those reflective mirrors, you will never see your real face. You need a space where there is no audience, no judgment, no pressure to become anyone at all. That is the only place where you can remove the persona without fear, and begin the most honest conversation you will ever have with yourself. So disappearing here is not a negative act of escape. It is a strategy for breaking the domination of the external gaze. It is the first step in reclaiming control over the story of your life. And we need to understand this deeply. The greatest danger is not that others misunderstand you, but that you misunderstand yourself, because you have grown too accustomed to seeing yourself through someone else's lens. And to illustrate the suffocating nature of this trap, and how it shows up in our everyday lives, let's move to real examples in the next section. To truly feel the weight of this perception trap, let your imagination drift into a metaphor of the theatrical stage. Picture your life as a grand theater, and you are the lead actor standing beneath blinding stage lights. Normally, after an actor finishes their role, they wait for the velvet curtain to fall. That is the sacred moment when they step backstage, wipe off the heavy makeup, remove the costume that isn't theirs, and exhale in relief as they return to their raw, ordinary self. But the tragedy of modern life is this: that velvet curtain seems to never truly close. We are living in a performance that runs 24 hours a day. Imagine that actor having to eat, sleep, think, and exist right there on stage, before thousands of invisible eyes watching. They are never allowed to step out of character. They must keep that smile even when their jaw is aching, must maintain that composed posture even when their spine feels like it's about to collapse. Slowly, the boundary between performer and role dissolves. The actor begins to panic when looking in the mirror, no longer remembering what their bare face even looks like. That is exactly the existential kind of burnout so many of us are living through. You can see this clearly in the smartphone you're holding in your hand. It isn't just a communication tool. It has become a portable spotlight, always shining directly on you day and night. Consider this common situation. You've just finished a long, exhausting day of work. Your body is desperate for rest. Your mind wants to power down. But then, a message notification goes off. Instantly, a conditioned reflex is triggered. You feel an invisible pressure forcing you to pick up the phone and respond immediately. Why? Because in your mind, delay equals being unprofessional, lazy, or worse, not caring about others. You type a message full of enthusiasm, sprinkle in cheerful emojis, while your real face tightens with fatigue. In that moment, you chose your persona over your own mental well-being. Or look at how we build our lives on social media. We become ruthless editors of our own existence. We only choose to post the most dazzling moments, luxurious trips, career achievements, beautifully plated meals. We create a flawless digital version of ourselves, an avatar that never feels sadness, never fails. But the danger is this: when friends and society interact with that image, when they like it, when they leave admiring comments, they are interacting with the mask, not with you. And when you receive applause for an unreal image, the loneliness inside you doesn't decrease, it multiplies. You feel lost even in the middle of praise, because deep down, you know that if they saw the real chaos, the anxiety, and the fractures inside you, they might not clap anymore. Another, even deeper example appears in our closest relationships. Maybe in your family or friend group, you've been unintentionally labeled as the strong one or the one who always listens. People come to you to unload their burdens, to seek advice, and they assume you're always okay. And because you want to protect that image, and you don't want to disappoint anyone, you keep bracing yourself to carry other people's emotions even while your own inner world is collapsing. You don't dare complain. You don't dare be weak, because that would violate the script they've already written for you. This exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from maintaining an act for far too long. The constant presence society praises is, in reality, a cage that imprisons personal freedom. We fear silence. We fear disappearing, because we fear that without applause, without external validation, we will no longer exist. But the brutal truth is this: the more we try to stay present to please others, the more absent we become in our own lives. This exhaustion is the soul's red warning signal, calling us to stop. It shows that your energy system is leaking badly, because it has been forced to feed illusions. And this is exactly the moment when the idea of intentional disappearance is no longer a luxury option. It becomes an urgent necessity for survival. Once we've recognized the invisible imprisonment of social expectations, the urgent question becomes, how do we escape it? The answer isn't found in loud battles or endless arguments to prove our worth to the outside world. Instead, it lies in a subtle yet powerful principle of action we call silent resistance. This is the crucial shift from passively enduring to actively rebuilding a living space for the soul. To truly understand this principle, we first need to perform a kind of linguistic surgery, to clearly separate two concepts that are dangerously and often confused: loneliness and solitude. In popular culture, both words tend to evoke sadness, abandonment, or separation from the community. But psychologically and spiritually, they are opposites, like day and night. Loneliness is a negative state that comes from a sense of deficiency. It is the pain of being alone when you crave connection, or worse, the feeling of isolation even when you're standing in the middle of a crowd. Loneliness is when you stare at the empty space beside you and feel afraid because no one is there to fill it. It drains your energy and makes you feel small and powerless in the face of the world. Solitude, on the other hand, is a positive state that comes from wholeness. It is the glory of being alone. In solitude, you aren't searching for someone else to fill a void, because you are busy enjoying your own presence. Solitude is not the absence of others, it is the full presence of self. When you choose solitude, you are not being abandoned, you are choosing yourself. Silent resistance begins the moment you dare to choose solitude instead of running from the fear of loneliness. In a noisy world that worships extroversion and constant connection, when an individual dares to step back, turn off the phone, refuse meaningless gatherings, and close the door to face themselves, this is a real act of rebellion. Why call it resistance? Because modern society, driven by the attention economy, is designed to extract as much of your time and mind as possible. Every notification, every ad, every social pressure is meant to pull you away from your own center to serve someone else's purpose. When you refuse to participate in that machine, you are carrying out a quiet revolution to reclaim sovereignty over the most precious assets of a human life, your attention and your inner energy. Silent resistance is not fueled by hostility or hatred toward humanity. It is a strict form of self-preservation. Imagine your mind as a house, with its windows wide open day and night. Dust, noise, and uninvited guests from the street keep pouring in, disrupting the order inside. Silent resistance is the courageous act of standing up and closing that door, not to lock yourself in darkness, but to stop the chaotic intrusion so you can begin cleaning and rearranging the interior of your soul. It is the act of establishing strong boundaries, where you declare, "This is my sacred space, and I have the right to decide who, or what, is allowed to enter." Many people mistakenly believe this withdrawal is selfish or lazy. But in truth, daring to disappear requires enormous inner strength and iron discipline. It is far easier to drift with the current, nod yes to every invitation, and let life push you around. It is far harder to stand still and say, "No, the silence that silent resistance creates is not an empty void. It is a nutrient-rich environment." It is in this intentional quiet that the loud voices of social judgment begin to fade, making room for the small but truthful voice of intuition and conscience to rise. This act of disappearing, therefore, is a strategy of rebirth. It allows our overstimulated nervous system to rest and recover. It is like letting exhausted land lie fallow after years of being overfarmed, so the soil can restore its fertility. When we practice solitude, we stop consuming and start creating. We stop reacting and start contemplating. We move from existing to be seen into living to understand. In short, silent resistance is the courage to become a deserter from the meaningless war for attention in our age. It is accepting the risk of being judged as strange, distant, or even arrogant, in exchange for peace and clarity of mind. You choose solitude not because you hate the world, but because you love yourself enough not to let yourself dissolve into it. This principle teaches us that before we can connect deeply with anyone else, we must learn to endure, and then to love, the presence of ourselves in silence. And when you can do that, your disappearance is no longer an escape. It becomes a pilgrimage back to the source of your own strength. To visualize the power of silent resistance as clearly as possible, let's return to the image of Carl Jung at the Bollingen Tower, but this time, let's see it as a strategic act rather than merely a geographic place. In the 1920s, Jung's reputation spread worldwide, and with it came relentless demands from patients, students, and the media. He was surrounded by letters, invitations to lecture, and fierce academic debates. If Jung had continued to be swept along by that current, he might have become a wealthy celebrity, but he certainly would never have left the profound intellectual legacy he is known for today. His retreat to Bollingen was a sharp declaration of resistance. He refused to let the outside world dictate the rhythm of his inner life. At Bollingen, Jung didn't simply sit and meditate. He did manual labor. He carved stone with his own hands to build new rooms, split firewood for warmth, and cooked over an open flame. Reflect on this transformation. From an intellectual doctor working with abstract concepts, he shifted to working with matter, concrete, rough, and real. That action carried enormous meaning. When his hands touched stone and wood, his mind was grounded back into reality. The tower's silence was not emptiness, but a massive filter. It filtered out mental noise, petty anxieties of city life, and made space for ideas from the unconscious to rise to the surface. Jung called this the life of personality number 2, the eternal, wise, and quiet human being, opposed to personality number 1, the social self that adapts to the times. Without that decisive separation, the voice of the eternal self would be forever drowned out by the clamor of survival and daily concerns. However, we don't need a tower by a lake, or to live like it's the Middle Ages, in order to apply this principle. Look at a closer example on your own desk, your computer. When a computer runs continuously for too long, with too many tasks open at once, it begins to slow down, heat up, and process less efficiently. Programs start to conflict, and the system freezes. In that situation, An IT expert solution isn't to open yet another cleanup app or install more software. The only solution, and the most effective one, is disconnect from the network and reboot. The human body and mind operate in a similar way, but far more complex. When we feel overloaded, exhausted, and lost, our usual reflex is to try to do more. We scroll social media even more for entertainment, drink more coffee to stay alert, and search for more advice. From the outside, we are trying to install new updates while the operating system is suffering a serious system-level failure. That is impossible. Silent resistance is the act of pressing that shut down button. You can't repair an airplane while it's flying, and you can't heal your soul while you're still racing through the social machine at a breakneck speed. Now imagine a real-life situation. You decide to do a small disappearance over the weekend. You tell the people close to you that you'll be offline, then you completely turn off your phone and computer for 24 hours. The first hours will feel like a real battle. You will feel restless, anxious, and you may even experience phantom vibration syndrome, the sensation that your phone is vibrating in your pocket even though it isn't there. This is your brain's dopamine addiction screaming to be fed. But if you persist and push through that threshold of discomfort, something miraculous happens. By the fourth or fifth hour, the silence begins to change its nature. It stops feeling terrifying and starts to feel luxurious. You begin to notice sunlight pouring through the window more brilliantly than usual. You taste the real sweetness of a cup of tea that, on most days, you drink in a rush. And most importantly, you begin to hear your own thoughts clearly, like listening to someone speaking right in front of you. Problems that tormented you all week suddenly become simpler, and solutions appear. Why? Because your processor has been freed from thousands of invisible background tasks. Solitude takes nothing from you. On the contrary, it returns to you the sharpness of your senses and the clarity of your mind. This example shows that solitude is not punishment or isolation. It's like bringing a ship into a dry dock to scrape off the barnacles clinging to its hull and service the engine. A ship was not made to stay in a dry dock forever. It was made to sail. But without those quiet periods in harbor, it will sink in the ocean under the weight of what has attached itself to it. Withdrawal, therefore, is the best preparation for moving forward. When you understand this, you'll see that refusing an unimportant appointment or turning off phone notifications isn't rude. It's a profound act of respect for the finely tuned biological machine that is you. After we've identified the perception trap and bravely carried out silent resistance to reclaim space for ourselves, we enter the most decisive phase of this entire journey. This is not the destination, but a deep inner transformation we call reconstruction and wholeness. If solitude is the act of creating emptiness, then reconstruction answers the question. What will we fill that emptiness with so we no longer depend on the outside world? Reconstruction is not a shallow self-help idea of reinventing yourself by changing your appearance or learning a new skill to impress others. At its core, it is a process of soul architecture. Imagine your mind as a house that has been tilted and damaged by time and by the storms of public opinion. The old foundations, built on fear, people-pleasing, and the need for approval, can no longer support the person you want to become. Reconstruction is the process of going down into the darkest basement of your being, demolishing limiting beliefs, and laying new bricks of core values chosen by you, not borrowed from anyone. The core principle of reconstruction is a shift in your locus of control. In the old state, we live outward-facing, seeking validation from applause or from hollow digital likes. Our worth rises and falls like a stock chart, depending on other people's moods. But in reconstruction, we begin building an internal frame of reference. Peace no longer comes from what others think of you. It comes from self-clarity, the absolute clarity you have with yourself. You begin to know what is noise and what is truth, what is a passing emotion and what is guiding intuition. This change happens quietly, with no fanfare, but it creates a stability so solid that no external turbulence can easily knock it down. Alongside reconstruction is the destination of wholeness. In depth psychology, wholeness does not mean perfection. Society teaches us to chase perfection, always happy, always successful, always positive. But perfection is an exhausting illusion, because it forces us to deny the imperfect parts of ourselves. Wholeness, on the other hand, is completeness. It is the state in which you accept and integrate every piece of who you are, both light and shadow, both strength and weakness, both achievements and unhealed wounds. When you disappear from society's judgment, you gain a rare chance to face your shadow, the darker part within you that you've spent years trying to hide beneath the persona mask. Reconstruction requires the courage to invite those rejected parts back to the round table of consciousness. You realize your sadness has value, your anger carries a message, and your exhaustion is a legitimate signal. When you stop fighting yourself to maintain a fabricated image, an enormous amount of energy is released. Instead of being burned up by repression, that energy is now used to heal and bind your inner fragments into a unified whole. This is where you touch real freedom, freedom from the need to prove who you are, because you already know who you are. This process of reconstruction operates on the principle of intentionality. Before, your life may have been a chain of unconscious reactions to environmental triggers. Someone says something harsh, you feel crushed. A new trend emerges, you chase it. But as you enter reconstruction, you begin living with intention. You become the editor of your life. You actively choose what kind of energy is allowed into your mind, what thoughts are worth feeding, and which relationships truly hold meaning. You are no longer a victim of circumstances. You become the architect of your fate. However, it must be emphasized that reconstruction is a solitary journey and demands extraordinary patience. In a world that worships speed and instant results, rebuilding the inner life happens slowly, like the growth of a tree's roots. There will be days when you feel like you're doing nothing at all, just sitting still and facing chaotic thoughts. But in that invisible quiet, new neural connections are being formed. Old mental grooves are being broken, and a new self is being conceived. No one applauds this process. No one gives you a medal for surviving an existential crisis in silence at 3 a.m. But the reward is priceless, a sense of inner authority. Inner authority is when your inner voice becomes louder and clearer than any noise from the outside. When you reach this state, you no longer fear disappearing or being forgotten, because you no longer need an audience in order to feel real. Seeing yourself is enough. Your presence becomes dense, weighted. Even when you say nothing, the peace that radiates from a strong inner structure is enough to affect the world around you. In short, reconstruction and wholeness is the transformation of solitude from a state you endure into a sacred construction site. It is the decision to stop searching for the missing piece in the outside world and to realize that you already have everything you need within you. It has simply been waiting to be rearranged into the right place. This principle reminds us of something vital. True stability is not a fortress that never collapses, but the ability to rebuild your wall stronger. After every collapse, through silence and deep understanding. To illustrate the outcome of this arduous process of reconstruction, imagine the moment of re-entry, the return to real life. But the return of someone who has undergone deep reconstruction is completely different from the loud comebacks we often see in the media or on social networks. In popular culture, change is usually marked by grand declarations, a long post explaining a new life philosophy, a dramatic glow-up photo set, or promises of explosive new projects. That's the old ego, the old self, seeking recognition for its change. But for someone who has truly touched inner wholeness, the return happens in absolute silence. They don't need to announce, "I've changed," because their presence itself becomes undeniable evidence. Picture a specific situation at work or at a social gathering. Before, when you walked into a room, you might have carried the energy of anxiety, constantly scanning for approval, laughing loudly to cover insecurity, or rushing to fill every pause in conversation because silence felt awkward. But after the period of disappearing and rebuilding, you walk into that same room with a completely different energy, the energy of being grounded, deeply rooted. You no longer need to be the center of attention, and you no longer fear fading into the background. You sit there, listening more than speaking, observing more than reacting. Your calm isn't indifference, it's the expression of an inner life that is no longer shaken by the small turbulence of the outer world. Like a rock in a stream, the water can rush past, push against it, but the rock remains steady where it is. Yet the clearest, and most painful, illustration of this change often appears in the transformation of personal relationships. Here is a reality few people dare to say out loud. When you change your vibration, those who are no longer on the same frequency will naturally fall away. Consider old friendships built on shared trauma or toxic habits. Maybe the bond between you and a group of people was built on complaining about work together, talking about others behind their backs, or drowning in all-night parties to escape reality. When you go through reconstruction, you begin to set new boundaries. You are no longer interested in negative conversations. You refuse to participate in pointless drama. You start saying no to invitations that drain your energy, without needing to invent an excuse. At that point, an invisible friction appears. Old friends may feel uncomfortable. They may accuse you of having changed, of being distant, or of not being the same anymore. In truth, their discomfort comes from the fact that you're no longer playing the role they expected you to play in their script. You've stopped supplying the kind of energy they were used to extracting from you. This is not a tragedy. It's a natural filtering mechanism of maturity. Imagine you are a puzzle piece in a larger picture. When the shape of the piece that is you changes, you will no longer fit with the old pieces around you. The loneliness you feel is a sign that you've outgrown a narrow, outdated frame. The people who genuinely value your core will stay and respect that growth. They'll be curious about the new you instead of judging it. And the ones who leave have simply finished their role in an earlier chapter of your life. This new wholeness also gives you a superpower in decision-making. Before, you might have spent hours, or even days, agonizing over a choice. Will they be upset if I do this? Is this good enough? A lack of wholeness forced you to borrow other people's moral compass to find your direction. But now, with deep inner connection, the answer often arrives immediately and clearly. Your intuition functions like an accurate GPS system. You know what aligns, and what does not align, with your values, without needing to consult the entire world. Finally, the most beautiful example of this return is the ability to enjoy joy independently. You may find yourself sitting alone in a cafe reading a book, or walking in a park, without feeling sorry for yourself or craving someone to accompany you. You no longer photograph your coffee to post on Instagram, waiting for likes to validate that my life is doing great. You know it's good, because you are experiencing it directly with all your senses. You are no longer performing happiness. You are practicing happiness. That initial disappearing can feel like a caterpillar locking itself inside a tight, dark cocoon. But the rebuilding inside that cocoon is the prerequisite for becoming a butterfly. When the butterfly breaks out, it can no longer crawl on the ground like before, and it can't explain to other caterpillars what flying feels like. It simply flies. That is the absolute freedom of a soul reborn from silence. We've traveled a long road, from recognizing the invisible wounds of the digital age, to understanding Carl Jung's philosophy of intentional solitude, to exploring the difficult process of inner reconstruction. But all of that insight will remain stuck at the level of theory if we can't bring it into the reality of daily life. The biggest question now is, how can we build our own Bollingen Tower while still paying monthly bills, still working 8 hours a day, and still raising children in a noisy city? How do we practice the art of disappearing without losing touch with reality, or becoming irresponsible? The answer is not that you must abandon everything and disappear into the mountains. In the modern world, disappearance, and reconstruction must be understood as psychological and behavioral strategies skillfully woven into everyday life. We don't need to change our home address. We need to change the address of our attention. Below is a detailed roadmap to help you begin practicing this way of living, shifting from passive endurance to actively designing your life. 1. Journaling, a dialogue with your true self. The most powerful, most accessible tool, and the foundation of reconstruction, is journaling. But forget the idea of journaling as merely recording daily events like what I ate or who I met. The kind of journaling we need here is reflective journaling, also known as shadow work. This is a direct conversation with yourself, a therapy session where you are both the doctor and the patient. Why is writing so important? Because thoughts in our heads are often floating, chaotic, and shapeless. When you put pen to paper, you are forced to materialize them. You pin them down, dissect them, and finally see their structure. Writing creates a safe distance between the observer, you, and the emotion, what you're experiencing. So you don't get swept away by the inner storm. Practice strategy. Start with the method of morning pages. The moment you wake up, before you touch your phone, before the outside world enters your mind, spend 15 to 20 minutes writing. Write whatever appears in your head. No grammar. No logic. No need to be good. The goal is to drain the subconscious noise out of your brain, clearing space for a new day. Guiding questions. When you feel lost, use deep prompts to activate self-awareness. Why does this situation make me so angry? What fear from the past is it touching? Am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I'm afraid of being judged? If no one were watching, how would I choose to live? Pattern recognition. At the end of each week, take time to reread what you wrote. You'll be shocked to discover repeating patterns in your emotions and behavior. This is where reconstruction begins. Once you can see the system error, you can finally fix it. 2. Micro-disappearance and setting digital boundaries. We can't disappear for an entire month, but we can absolutely disappear for 1 hour a day. In a hyper-connected world, the ability to become unavailable is a supreme form of power. You must learn to create intentional dead zones in your day to protect your energy. The airplane mode ritual. Turn airplane mode into the gateway to your personal temple of silence. Commit to at least 1 hour a day, early morning or before bed, to completely disconnect from the internet. During that time, you belong fully to yourself. No news. No email. No social media. This is the space for deep reading, meditation, or simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea and watching the world. The no instant replies rule. Train yourself not to respond to messages immediately if it's not a life or death emergency. Society pressures us into instant gratification, but we are the ones who teach others how to treat us. When you begin replying more slowly and thoughtfully, you are silently telling the world that your time and attention are valuable assets, not free resources anyone can take whenever they want. Input diet. Inner Reconstruction cannot succeed if you keep feeding your mind informational trash. Do a full digital cleansing. Unfollow accounts that make you feel insecure, jealous, or anxious. Leave toxic group chats. Turn off all unnecessary notifications. Remember, every notification is an invitation to abandon the present and step into someone else's agenda. Refusing that invitation is the first step of freedom. 3. Restructuring relationships and the art of saying no. The hardest, but most liberating, application of this philosophy lies in social relationships. As you begin to change, you will need to renegotiate the terms of your relationships with the people around you. This requires courage and finesse. From FOMO to JOMO, replace the fear of missing out with the joy of missing out. When you turn down a loud party to stay home reading or caring for your plants, don't feel guilty. Enjoy the joy of owning your time. You're not missing anything. You're being present with yourself. A complete refusal. Learn to say no politely but firmly. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to invent excuses like being sick or having family obligations to decline an invitation. You can simply say, "Thank you for inviting me, but right now I need to focus on myself, so I can't join." People who respect you will understand. Setting boundaries doesn't destroy quality relationships. It filters out relationships based on exploitation or shallow social obligation. Deep connection. When you've spent enough time in solitude, the moments you choose to connect with others become deeply meaningful. Instead of meeting 10 people superficially, choose one close friend and have a true conversation, deep talk. Bring the full presence you cultivated in solitude into the dialogue. Listen with your whole heart, no judgment, no checking your phone while they speak. That is the greatest gift you can give another human being. 4. The editor mindset in work and life. Finally, apply the reconstruction mindset to how you run your life. See yourself as the editor-in-chief of the newspaper of your existence. You can't control the news, events, that happen each day, but you have complete authority to decide which story makes the front page, which one gets discarded, and what the headline, your perspective, will be. Manage energy, not time. Don't try to cram too much into one day. Identify the hours when your mind is sharpest, peak performance, and reserve them for creativity and deep thinking, deep work. Protect those hours like treasure. During them, disappear from workplace communication channels, if possible, to focus fully. Outstanding results will be the best explanation for your absence. The gap between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl said, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." The practical application is the habit of the pause. When something triggers you, don't react instantly. Breathe deeply, step back, observe the emotion rising, and only then choose your action. Those few seconds of silence are where wisdom lives. They move you from victim to master of the moment. Intentional living. Before you begin a new day, set an intention for that day, not a long to-do list, but a posture of being. For example, today I choose calm, or today I choose focus. That intention becomes a compass, helping you navigate the chaos without losing yourself. Start small to go far. By now, you may feel overwhelmed by how much needs to change. But remember a core principle of sustainable growth: microsteps. You don't need to do everything at once. Sudden change often triggers resistance and leads to quick failure. Start very small. This week, commit to not bringing your phone into the bedroom. Next week, try morning pages for 5 minutes. The week after that, decline one meaningless appointment. Confidence and inner strength are built from the small promises you keep to yourself. Just as Jung built the Bollingen Tower one stone at a time over many years, you are building your inner temple one small action at a time. Don't lose heart if there are days you fail, if you get pulled back into the social media spiral or old anxieties. That is completely normal. What matters is that you recognize it and gently return yourself to the path, without judgment, without self-punishment. The journey back to your true self is not a straight line. It is an upward spiral. Every time you choose silence over noise, every time you write instead of repressing, every time you choose yourself over someone else's approval, you are laying another solid brick in the foundation of your freedom. The modern world may be loud and full of pressure, but it cannot take away your power to choose. You always have the right to close the door, light the lamp of awareness, and sit down for an honest conversation with yourself. And it is in those ordinary, simple moments that the miracle of rebirth quietly happens. Of course, having the courage to step out of society's usual current has never been an easy journey. When you begin applying this philosophy, you may face an enormous psychological barrier: guilt. In a culture that worships business, choosing stillness is often mistaken for laziness or irresponsibility. A small voice in your head may keep whispering that you're being selfish, that you're abandoning the people around you, or that you're escaping reality, escapism, instead of facing it. Some critics also argue that human beings are social creatures, and that retreating into solitude can lead to extreme isolation, causing us to lose empathy for the community. Is this philosophy too extreme, or is it only for the privileged, those with enough financial security to walk away from the world? The answer lies in correctly understanding the nature of freedom. True freedom does not come from disappearing physically forever. It comes from internal choice. We withdraw not to cut off our connection with humanity, but to preserve our capacity for the healthiest form of connection. You cannot pour water for others from an empty cup. Real selfishness is not taking time to heal yourself. It is continuing to spill your exhaustion and toxicity onto others because you refuse to stop and repair your inner world. Moreover, we must clearly distinguish between running away from hardship and stepping back to build momentum. Escapism is when you use distraction to numb pain. Solitude is when you use silence to face that pain and transform it. You begin editing your inner life, clearly separating noise from truth. So the greatest challenge is not fighting the outside world, but conquering the fear within yourself, the fear that keeps you from living truthfully, even if only for a single moment. Through this long journey of exploring the art of disappearing, we've traveled together from the fear of being forgotten in the rush of life to the deep peace of an unshakable inner world. We've seen that stepping away from the noise of the world is not a weak escape, but a wise strategy for rebirth. The principles, from silent resistance to the painful but necessary process of reconstruction, have proven one simple truth: you don't need to shout to be heard, and you don't need to be constantly present to prove you exist. In the end, the most important thing you must carry with you after today is the awareness that true freedom is always an internal choice. You have every right to edit your life, cutting away excess noise so that truth can speak. When you've built a Bollingen Tower within your own mind, where your value is defined by your own clarity, not by the applause of others, you reach the highest level of maturity. That is when you return to the world without needing to explain your absence, and without needing to apologize for having changed. Your full, calm, and powerful presence will speak for itself. Remember, the world may demand your attention, but it does not own your soul. Don't wait until you're completely exhausted to begin searching for silence. Starting today, allow yourself to take a step back, even a small one, so you can reconnect with the most important person in your life, yourself. Peace doesn't need applause. It only needs you to truly see yourself. If this piece touched something deep within you, or if you're also holding the intention to build your own Bollingen Tower, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this video with anyone who needs a moment of quiet to find themselves again. Your support is the motivation that helps us continue creating deeper content. Thank you for giving your precious time to listen, and I'll see you again in the next journey of exploring the mind.